I'm Brent. I've been working in the film industry for over a decade building software for artists. In this video, I'm going to show you how to take command line arguments in Python using the most common features of Argparse. Make sure to stay till the end, because I'm going to be showing you a really useful pattern for taking complex arguments. There are chapter markers so you can skip around, as well as a link to an article that contains all of the commands and code I use. So let's get to the content. I already have some code prepared. That is just the boilerplate things that we need to actually get set up and to start taking arguments. So what we have here is I have an import at the top for argparse. I have a main function that is called if this is the main script that is being run. And the main function calls its own parse args function, and that returns some args. This is a super common pattern for a lot of the scripts that you're going to be writing, and that you're going to have a main, and that is going to have its own argument parsing function that will deal with all of the arg parsing. Let's get to parsing some args. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is create a parser. So we're going to do parser is equal to argparse dot argument parser, and we're going to pass in a description. This is the description that's going to show for your program if you pass it the -h flag. So we're just going to say this gives examples of how to parse args. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to return parser dot parse args. So we've created a parser, and then we call the parser's parse args function. And so this is the first thing we're going to do, and we're just going to run it to see what we get. So I have the file named argparse example.py. So we're going to run python argparse example.py. And so it does an error, and we can run it with the -h flag, and you get a help menu. So that's great. That the built-in help menu comes from you setting up the parser and running parse args. So let's add our first arg to parse. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a positional argument. So a positional argument is an argument that is generally required for you to pass when you run the command line program, and it's going to be based on its position, and that's why it's called a positional arg. So we're going to do parser dot add argument, and I'm going to call this echo. That's going to be the name of the positional argument, and we're going to add some help text. So the help text is going to be echo the string you use here. And yeah, that's our first argument we've added. So if we go back and run the program with the -h flag again, you can see that we get that it shows that there are positional arguments. One is echo. And you can also see here in the usage example, it shows argparse underscore example.py and then echo. So let's actually get the echo input. So we're down here in the main, and so what we're going to do is we're going to actually access what we get when a person runs the program and gives a positional argument. So we're just going to do a print statement in the main, and so we're just going to do print echo format args dot echo. So As you can see here, the way that we access the args is we get the args from the parse_args function, and then we do args dot and then the name of the argument that we're pulling. And so since I named the argument echo up here, that's what we have to put in here to actually get its value. And so if we go and run it again, so Python argparse example.py, and we actually pass it something. So I'm going to pass it the string hello. You can see here that we get it outputting hello. Something worth noting is that positional arguments are required. So if I try to run argparse example.py without passing anything, as you can see here, it errors because it shows that the echo positional argument is required. So let's move on to adding optional arguments. Optional arguments are arguments that usually start with a dash dash or a dash. And so let's get to the code to do that. So let's say we wanted to take in a name. So we're going to add a new argument. So we're going to do parser.add argument. And this time we're going to be doing dash dash name. And we're going to give it the help text, give me a name. And then we're going to give a new keyword argument called action is equal to store. So what are actions? So actions are what Argparse should do with input. And in this case, we're going to be storing it. Storing is the default action for Argparse. So let's add a little bit more code to the main section so we can print out what we get with the name flag or the name argument, and then we'll run it. The way that we can check that the argument has been passed is you can just do a check of if args dot and the name of it. In this case, it is name. And so what we're going to do is we're going to print name and then the name that we get, dot name. And let's run it. Remember that we have to pass a positional argument for echo, and so we can now also pass name, and let's give it the name Bob. And if we run it, what we can see here is that we get echo hello as we did before, but now we are printing out Bob. And you can run it without having to do the name, and you just still get the echo hello, and it doesn't error because this is an optional argument. And if we wanted to, we could just not even use this line for action store. It would still work. So if we run it again and we pass it Bob, it works the same. But I'm going to leave it here because it's good to just know that that's what it's running for this example. One last thing to note is that if you want to pass a string that has a space in it, like let's say that you wanted to give Bob's full name, so Bob Smith, you were going to have to put quotes around it. Just like that. And it will get Bob Smith. Because if you don't, let's see what happens. Yeah, it's going to be confused because it gets this unrecognized argument. So if you want to pass in something with spaces in it, make sure to put quotes around it. Next, let's say you just wanted to know if they gave a command line argument. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new argument to show this. So we're going to do another parser.add argument. And this time we're going to call it -- switch on. We're going to have a help is equal to turn the switch on. And then we're going to set the action. For this action, we're going to be using store true. So action is equal to store true. What this means is that if someone passes the switch on flag, then it will return true for switch on. So let's add down in the main a section for switch on. So we are going to print out switch on format args dot switch on. And then let's run it. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass it the switch on flag. And as you can see here, switch on is true. And let's say that we don't pass the switch on flag. You can see here that it returns false. This is super useful for when you want to know if a user wants to turn on a specific feature. The two that I have shown, store and store true, are the most common that you're going to be using. If you want to see the rest of the actions that are available, in the article, I will link to the documentation where you can see all of the different store actions that you can use. The next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be converting types. So when you have an argument that uses the store action, it's going to return a string by default. But what if we wanted to get something like an integer back? So let's get on that. So we're going to create a new argument to show this. And what we're going to do is we're going to do as we have before. We're going to add an argument. This time it's going to be count is what we're going to call it. So -- count. And the help text is going to be give me a number. And then we're going to use a new keyword argument that we haven't used yet, and that is going to be type. And this time we're going to pass it int. Type takes in any callable, so something like a function, that takes in a string. In this case, we're giving it the int function. The int function will take in a string and try to convert it into an integer. So if we go down to the main function, why don't we add another print statement for getting that? We're going to print out count, but I need to also show you that we are getting the int type. So I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to do type of count. So I'm going to do type, just so that you can know for sure that the thing that we're getting back from this is not a string, but it is an integer. So let's run it. So if we go back to the command line, and this time we give it count, and we give it the number 10, you can see here that we get count is 10, but you can see here that we get the type of count is the class int, which is what we wanted. So this means that it shows that we have actually gotten the conversion to actually work. You can do the same thing with like float or your own custom functions. So this is really useful. There are a lot more examples of what you can use with this type keyword, and those can be found linked in the article that is down in the description. So make sure to check that out if you want to know more. One somewhat useful but controversial thing that you can do is you can make optional arguments required. And I know that sounds a little crazy. Why would you, like, optional arguments are named optional for a reason, but there are sometimes cases that you might want to do this. And so I'm going to show you how to do this. So we're going to go back and we're going to make our own required optional argument. And so we're going to do parser.add argument, and this one is going to be last name. And we're going to do an help equals your last name. And so the keyword argument that we need to pass to this is going to be required equals true. So by default, required is set to false because these are supposed to be optional arguments. And so right now we're making it required. And so let's add down to the main function a printout so that we can get the output. So we're going to do a print last name format args.last name. And let's run it. So we are going to give it the last name arg, and we're going to give it Smith. And yeah, as you can see here, we have last name coming in as Smith. And so if I run this again, except I don't give it the last name argument, you can see here that it errors. It shows that the following arguments are required -- last name. As I noted before, making optional arguments required is controversial. Even the documentation says required options are generally considered bad form because users expect options to be optional, and thus they should be avoided when possible. So be very careful when you use these and only use them when you need them. Moving on. Let's say that you wanted to get multiple things from a single argument. So let's show an example of what that looks like. So back up to the parse args function, we are going to add another argument. And so we are going to add parser.add argument, and we're going to add the add argument. And then we're going to pass it the help of add the following number. And we're going to use type because we're going to want these as a list of numbers, not strings. And so we're going to do type as int. And then we're going to do a new keyword argument, and that is going to be nargs is equal to star. So nargs can take a couple of different options. We're going to be using the star option. The star option means that we can take 0 or more things with the add argument. So let's go down to the main function, and I will add another print statement for us to show the output, and then we'll go ahead and run it. If args.add print add dot format args dot add, and then just for the fun of it, we're going to have another print statement where we're actually going to add all the args together. So we're going to do sum of add, just to prove that we're getting in a list of integers and not a list of strings. So we're going to do sum of args.add. So let's go ahead and run it. So we have our required args, and then we're going to add add -- add. And we're going to give it a couple of numbers. So I'm going to give it 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to run it. And as you can see here, we got add, and it returned a list of numbers, 1, 2, and 3. And then we got the sum of add, which is equal to 6. So just to prove that this can take as many or as little arguments as you want, I'm just going to remove the 1, 2, and 3. And as you can see here, it doesn't error. But what if you wanted to force it so that it makes sure that it takes one or more things? So that's going to be our next example. So if we go back here and we add a new argument, we're going to add parser.add argument, and we're going to give it -- numbers. And the help is going to be give me at least one number. The type, like last time, is going to be int. And this time for nargs, we're going to be using plus. So we're going to do nargs is equal to the plus sign. The plus sign means take one or more things from that argument. So let's go down to the main to print out what we get. So we're going to do print numbers. And we're going to give it args.numbers. And if we run this, what we're going to do is we're going to give it numbers. And the numbers we're going to give it are 4, 5, and 6. 4, 5, and 6. Now, as you can see here, we get back the 4, 5, and 6. And if we passed numbers and we didn't give it anything, you can see here that we get an error, and it says that numbers expected at least one argument. So that is how we can force the user to give at least one argument. Note, you can still just not pass the numbers flag. It will still run, and you can see here that the thing that it gets set to is none. So those are the most common features that you're going to be using with Argparse, but let's get to the bonus I promised you. Sometimes it can be very useful to take in complex input, and in my experience, one of the easiest ways to take in complex input for command line arguments is to do key value pairs. So when I say key value pairs, think of a Python dictionary. So I'm going to show you how I take in a number of key value pairs as arguments and then process them. So let's get to the coding. So we're going to add a new command line argument. So let's go back to the code, and we're going to do parser.add argument as we've done before. And this one is going to be called pairs. Pairs. And then we are going to do our regular help. And we're going to do create a set of key dash value pairs, period. And then we want to be able to do 0 or more of these pairs. So we're going to be passing it nargs is equal to star, like we have done before. And then the new thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be passing metavar is equal to key equals value. And so you might be thinking, what is metavar? So let's go to the help menu so that I can give you an example. So if we run argparse example.py and give it the -h, so when it shows the optional arguments, for example, name, it will have a placeholder for what you are passing. So by default, this placeholder is going to be all caps the name of the argument. So for our case, this we have -- name, and so it is name. So the metavar is what this placeholder is. So you can change what that placeholder is. And so in my case, I am changing that placeholder to be key value. And as you can see here, we have the pairs, and we have changed the metavar so that it's not going to be all caps pairs. It is going to be a list of key value. So it puts list because it knows that it's an nargs star, and then it's key value because that's what I put as the metavar. And before I go on, I'm going to fix this typo of Great. So let's actually print out what we get from this argument. So down in the main, we're going to do if args dot pairs. We're going to print pairs dot format, and we're going to do args dot pairs. So let's run it. We're going to pass the required as well as pairs, and we're going to give it a list of key value pairs. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it fruit is equal to pair number is equal to 2, and letter is equal to Z. And if we hit enter, you can see here we get the pairs, and we get basically a list of strings of key value pairs. So it's cool that we got the list of pairs that we wanted, but this would be a lot more useful if it was stored as a dictionary for the key value pairs. So we're going to do some processing of the input. So we're going to go back here, and we're going to create our own function. This function is going to be called parse pairs. And we're going to pass it the pairs, the list of pairs. And then we're going to create a dictionary, and we're going to go through all the pairs. So for pair in pairs, we're going to split them on the equal sign. So we're going to do items is equal to pair dot split on equals. And then we're going to add to the dictionary those items. So we have item at 0, which is the key. And then we're going to set the value, which is items at 1. And then we're going to return the dictionary. So now we're going to use the parsed version. So we're going to do print parsed pairs is equal to dot format, and we're going to do parse pairs args dot pairs. And so if we run the same code again, you can see here that we get the processed or parsed pairs. And so we can see that we get the keys and values stored in a dictionary, which is super, super useful. And one last thing to note about this is if you're going to be using this key value pair parsing, if you want to use spaces, you're going to have to use quotes. So for example, you can use the quotes either in the key or the value. It doesn't really matter, or both. So I'm going to show you examples of that. So we're going to do it in the key. So fruit1. So the key, it has the quotes around it and a space, where the value does not. In this one, I'm going to show you it where the key does not have spaces and the value has a space. So we're going to do number 2. And then for the last one, we're going to do it in both. So a letter and letter Z. And so as you can see here, we have an example where it's just the key. One is just the value, and one with both the key and the value having quotes. And so if we run it again, you can see here that the pairs comes out so that you get a string with the quotes already taken out of it. They're already stripped out, but you get the spaces, and it doesn't cause problems as a command line argument. And so you get the parsed pairs as well, and they would be what you expect. So the key has the space in it, and the value also has spaces in it when necessary. Thank you for watching. If there's a topic that you would like me to cover in a new video, please put it down in the comments. I'm always looking for new video topics. If you got value out of this video, hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. And if you want to see more like it, please consider subscribing. And like all software made for movies, we test in production. Thank you, and I'll see you around.